Alrighty. Again, thank you all for joining us for the 3C Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting for December 2023. This meeting is recorded and posted to our YouTube channel and linked to our website. So with that, no decisions are made at these meetings. This is just a forum where we're able to have a little bit of a deeper dive into different applications, issues, presentations, and discussion outside of our monthly public meeting where decisions can be made at that time. With that, I know we originally only had 2 items on the agenda. I'm going to take a little bit of a privilege of the co-chair here with Commissioner Gordon. And add 1 item. So the original items were the BZA application for 3601 34th Street Northwest and an informational presentation on the Green New Deal for Social Housing Bill. The addition is the BZA application for St. Albans School, the Little Sanctuary Chapel project. In the interest of how these things might fall, because the St. Albans School BZA application came before the ANC last term, and it's just an update on that to go through its next zoning iteration. We're going to start with the 3601 34th Street, then do the St. Albans School, and then do the informational presentation on the Green New Deal, because that's probably going to be where the most questions and discussion occur. If anybody has any objection to that, please speak now or we'll carry on. Great. All right. Is the applicant here for 3601 34th?
So I believe Marty will be presenting. Right, Marty?
I was going to introduce it.
Okay.
Michelle is here too. She could, but I can also share the plans from my screen too. So
let us know who'll be sharing screen and we'll make them a co-host.
I didn't.
I can share, Marty. This is Natalie.
Oh, Natalie. Oh, Natalie's here too. Okay. Yeah, Natalie.
Perfect.
Okay, great. If Natalie can share, I can introduce her real quick.
Great.
Okay.
And I think I'll share the photos because while I'm talking about it, because that'll be
sure. And
easy enough.
Marty, I encourage you to keep it about 5 minutes, just focusing on the key aspects. Again, the commission has the entire plan, so we don't need to go through the whole thing, just 5 minutes of the plans, and then when we do the questions, we can ask for more detail if needed.
I'll try to keep it less than that because I think that's more than it should take even. But I figured it might be helpful to show the videos. If you can see the video here, or that, not the video, a photo. That's the house. Let me get to a good, so this here, back here, you see the screen porch, or not screen porch, but the porch, the covered porch. The addition is in the same footprint of this porch, essentially, and goes up to here. So I think that's enough context. I'll stop sharing and turn it over to Natalie. Natalie, if you want to just show them a plan. And if you have trouble bringing it up, I can share. I already have it up on my screen.
You can all see this?
We can see it.
Okay, great. So I'll start on the lower level here. Piggybacking onto what Marty said.
Floor plans is probably, we could probably go beyond floor plans either. I bet like an elevation, a rear or side elevation is probably enough.
Sure. So let's jump into the elevations then. Looking at the existing side elevation along Porter Street here. So the existing rear porch that we were talking about here has a portion of storage enclosed on the lower level, which is a walkout basement area. And the proposed addition occupies that same footprint. So we're taking over the space here on the ground level, that basement level, and then as well as the existing porch area, and then a 3rd floor addition as well. So looking at the materiality here on this elevation, we're maintaining the brick that is existing at the house. So the brick would occupy the lower level as well as the first floor. And then at the third story, or which is what we call the second floor, it goes back to the stucco, which is consistent with the existing structure. In terms of windows, we're maintaining the existing kind of look of what is there now. We'd be removing this double window here and replacing it with 2 single double hung windows. And then you can see an additional window here on the first floor addition area. And at this area here at the lower level, we're removing a basement window and replacing it with a larger window. The front elevation would remain unchanged from what's there now along 34th Street. And then at the rear, you could see the existing, so that storage area that's currently enclosed, the porch at the first floor, and then the roof that's existing now. So we'd be removing this existing rear wall, and this is that 3 level addition. At the neighboring property here, they also have this rear addition as well, enclosed at the second or the first floor level, and then their second story here is a porch. So then looking at 3D views, this is the existing view is what's here now, and then the proposed view as well. So this is basically from the corner. And then the existing view from the rear. So that's the existing porch, which we would be, the addition would be occupying that existing footprint. So we would not be changing the existing rear setback. That's where we're going to BZA to request the allowability to maintain the existing setback. We would not be impacting kind of the light and air or the enjoyability of the neighbors.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that up first. Sorry, Natalie, I should have mentioned it first. This 2 things here: special exception for rear yard. We're asking for 3.4 feet of relief for the rear yard to go on the same footprint, and then of course historic as well.
Yeah, so we have already.
We're only voting on zoning, right? We're not voting on historic today, or we're not voting on anything today. But this ANC meeting, you only need a vote on zoning. You don't need a vote on historic right now.
Should we be coming back for a separate committee meeting? Okay.
Well, you don't need to come back, but I didn't see the HPRB application attached. I only saw the zoning application attached. So, I mean,
we have reached out to HPO, and they indicated that we did not need to review this with HPRB. We'd be reviewing it at the staff level.
So then you don't need our approval either for historic, right?
Guess not then. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, we're just doing zoning then. Great, thank you. Is anything else, Natalie or Marty?
I don't think so. It looks like somebody maybe had a question.
Yeah, John, before you ask a question, I do want to give I see or I did see Praveen Ramalingam online. I want to give them a chance to say something if you want, because I believe you're the owners, and you can talk a little bit about, you're living in the neighborhood and what you plan on doing with this and stuff like that.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Praveen. It's my wife Heather.
Hello.
And there's a kid down there. We've been in the neighborhood since 2018, and since we purchased the property. It had been neglected for a while. I think it stayed vacant for a while, but we put some work, kind of like bring it up to standards. Been on the inside.
Daddy.
Look. And now we're kind of like, we obviously have a kid. We're expecting a second one, and we're looking to basically like get a little bit more living space that's more usable, so that we can, continue to stay in the neighborhood for the foreseeable future, not having any more applications. So.
Yeah.
Perfect.
No, I'm good. I think this would help us kind of actually have enough living space for 2 kids and some work from home. So I think that definitely would kind of help keep it a livable space for sure.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for joining our meeting. So I'll now transfer it over to some of my committee members for questions. So, Mr. Goodman, why don't you go ahead?
I was puzzled by the application because, at least as far as I can tell, the rear yard is undersized now, but you're not making it any smaller. You're just, why are they putting you through the trouble of going to the BZA?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's true in the residential zones, if you have a building that had a certain footprint in the rear as of 1958, you're allowed to go up on that same footprint.
Right.
But we tried with DOB to confirm that. We couldn't get them to agree with us that they wouldn't confirm that the footprint was there in 1958.
So this was a DOB issue, not a zoning administrator issue, or was
well,
it?
yeah, DOB zoning the zoning administrator's
Okay,
office.
so it was a zone,
yeah.
because we heard a month ago in a completely different context of the zoning administrator, who's new, as you all know, being a little hard ass about things, and this seems to fall into the same bucket. So
Don't get me started.
I won't, but I can understand the frustration with the new policy down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goodman. Commissioner Gordon, did you have a question?
Not really a question, but just, I mean, I kind of was also a little bit surprised that you would have to go through all of it. More just, congratulations on your new arrival. We're glad you're staying in the neighborhood and happy to, see this through.
Thank you.
I second that too. So thank you and sorry. But thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you for the consideration. Regardless, even if you had to go through it or not, it's good. At least there's a process. Good.
Any other committee members have questions, or any members from the community? Would you have any questions?
Oh, I guess my only one was we got a letter in support of this project from the neighbors.
Yes, we got at least one email in support. And I just want to check if I haven't heard any opposition to this at all. So but I appreciate you reaching out to the neighbors as well. That helps us in justifying what we do too.
Yeah, we reached out to all the neighbors. They've all voiced support for this. We're kind of in the process of getting some written confirmations just so that we can submit that as well.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Right. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you again. Congratulations again. We're so happy you're staying in the neighborhood. The next step is that I'll be drafting up a resolution. I'll be sending it to you all. And then I'll be sending it to my fellow commissioners, and we will vote on it at our next meeting, at our official ANC meeting, which is December 18th at 7 p.m. via Zoom. But I'll get you all the details for that as well. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up is St. Albans. I believe Suzanne and Christine. Which one of you, or are both of you going to be presenting, or somebody else?
Commissioner, this is Christine Scheiker. I will take the lead. Robert Allen is also here. He is the architect on the project, and Suzanne Woods is with us. She is the associate head of school for St. Albans. And so we are here to present the proposed expansion and renovation project for the chapel building known as the Little Sanctuary, which is on the grounds of St. Albans. This project proposes to add mechanical ventilation to the Little Sanctuary and to modestly increase the footprint of the building. It's about approximately 1,900 square feet. And in just a minute, I will have Robert share his screen so that he can walk through the plans. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the application first. The increase in size, as you may or may not recall when this came last year, is so that each, the upper and the lower schools, can separately use the building for chapel. Currently, excuse me, the Little Sanctuary cannot fully accommodate the upper school students and faculty. But with this expansion, which takes it up to approximately 420 to 450 for occupancy, all of the students in the upper school and the faculty can all be seated during chapel. And so that's just a very important element of the school. This was brought to the ANC in mid-2022, and that at that point we brought a concept application to go to the Historic Preservation Review Board. It was supported by the ANC, and HPRB then approved that concept design. And it's essentially the same thing that we're going to present tonight. The basement's just gotten a little bit smaller, which Robert will show you. But since that time, St. Albans has been working to finalize that design and to confirm funding for the project. But as a legal matter, while the project doesn't impact any of the zoning approvals for the St. Albans private school, for example, there's no change to the number of students or to the faculty and staff. There's no impact to the parking requirement. But because there is new construction, it does require approval from the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Assuming that we're able to receive support from the ANC, we would like to submit this application as a modification without a public hearing. That would allow us to be considered more quickly before the Board of Zoning Adjustment, and it would allow St. Albans to meet its anticipated construction start date for the summer of 2024. So what we're asking for this evening from the ANC is support for this proposed modification to allow the construction of this addition with no change to the underlying zoning approvals for St. Albans. And that would be either with or without a hearing before the BZA, and for continued support for the project as we process through HPRB. We do not believe that we have to go back since it's essentially the same design, but we will need to submit for permit. I'll also just point out, I heard the question on the last case about the neighbors. St. Albans does have a neighborhood working liaison group that was created many years ago. They meet twice a year. Suzanne actually hosted a special meeting last week to walk through the proposal, and they've been up to date on this. We haven't heard any concerns, and we've been answering the questions, but just letting you know we have gone through that process as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Robert and ask him just to briefly walk through the expansion, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Christine. So my name is Robert Allen. I'm a principal with DLR Group Bowie Gridley. So I think you last saw a presentation by Cal Bowie about this project at Concept Design. I'm happy to come back to you this evening with virtually the same presentation, since very, very little has changed from the initial concept. With that, I'd like to share my screen and walk you through some of the slides we prepared. I'm going to go through the context fairly quickly, since I think everyone here is probably familiar with it, and concentrate mostly on refreshing your memory about the design elements, and then we can address any questions. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Great. So starting out with an overview, this is, of course, is the National Cathedral Historic Close District. And the little sanctuary is actually completely interior to the campus grounds. The building is located off of Pilgrim. There's a little circle called Senior Circle, and that's where it's located. Again, just for context, here's the cathedral. You know, here's Wisconsin, here's Massachusetts, there's Pilgrim, and the little sanctuary is located right here. And if you've walked on the grounds, I'm sure you're familiar with the general appearance. It's a very interesting building, added on to over a number of years from its original construction. Its primary finish is a pebble dash stucco with a slate roof. Our intention is really to create an addition that looks like it's always been there, so that when we're done, it looks like, oh, it's always been this size. So this aerial view shows a little sanctuary. Here's Pilgrim, here is Senior Circle. And right here, this little element right here is the sundial. that will be relocated slightly as part of this project. Okay, so this is the existing civil drawing that shows the site plan. There's the sundial. Here's the outline of the existing building. And our addition is this area that is colored in yellow. It is essentially a one-story addition, although it does have a tower at the crossing. And we'll show you what that looks like. It is what we presented before. It helps sort of tie in and break up the massing, so this thing does not seem to be so large. One of the very important characteristics of this building is its intimate scale. And I know our client has been very concerned that we try to maintain that character even though we are expanding it. This is a rendered site plan. It's a little bit easier to see. This is a site plan that was presented to the Historic Preservation Office when we were doing preliminary permitting. Essentially, the existing building is right here. In the next slide, I'll show you, we're cutting off a small portion of it, adding this on, and extending in the same axis as it currently is. The sundial gets shifted slightly to the north and is now oriented to the corner. And now we have also introduced a circulation route, basically a sidewalk going all the way around the circle so that pedestrians can get to all sides of the sanctuary and students can come in into the new addition. This diagram is a massing diagram. I believe this was presented during concept design. The first drawing on the left shows the existing little sanctuary building, and the pink area that you see is actually the part that we're taking off. And what we're really doing is we're stretching that, adding another crossing wing and this little tower that's located here, and then grafting back on the existing stained glass window that is at the east end of the project. Okay, in terms of the expansion, as Christine had mentioned, really the only difference between what we envisioned at concept versus now is we had always planned on doing a basement to house mechanical equipment. That basement actually has become smaller now. It really has no difference on the footprint of the building in terms of how it's appears from the outside. On the first floor, this was the existing layout on the left here. This is the proposed layout, and this is how we're able to get the additional students into this building. So it also gives us a little bit more rational organization of how the pews are set up, and will house both student bodies when we get together. This addition also now is providing barrier-free access from both sides of the building. So from Pilgrim, there will be barrier-free access, and there's also barrier-free access using access to a chairlift that takes you up to this level. So now this building will be completely compliant in terms of accessibility.
Sorry, Mr. Allen, do you have many slides left?
Nope, I have, I think, 2 more.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. So very quickly, here's the existing elevations on the left. On the right, the existing part is gray. The new part is in white. This is the other 2 elevations, the south and east elevations. You can see that the new addition is pretty much at the same heights as the existing elements. And my very last slide is this one. This is the rendered elevations that they're very similar to what you saw in concept design. The difference being a couple of exit doors that were added for accessibility at the crossing. With that, I'm happy to address any questions.
Great, thank you. And will you have to go to HPRB again or just BZA? Sorry.
So we do have to submit as part of a permit application to HPRB. We actually went through that process once already. Earlier this spring, Steve Calcott indicated he would approve the design as presented in that site plan. We did some minor revisions since that submission to the basement, so we will resubmit, but we expect he will approve it again.
At the staff level, okay.
At the staff level, yes, that's right.
Great, thank you. All right, so just so everybody is aware of this is actually in Commissioner Rick Nash's SMD. However, were you guys able to get in touch with Commissioner Nash yet?
We haven't yet. We followed up again, but we're happy to sit down and meet with him whenever, between now and the full ANC meeting later this month.
Okay.
We're hopeful to get to review it with him.
Great. Yes. But yes, we figured this would be an opportunity to engage with the rest of the commission and the members of this committee on this. John, you have a question?
I do, actually two. Is this consistent with the campus plan for the school and the close?
Well, so what we would need to do is go and get a modification to the private school plan because it's not shown, it hasn't been shown on an approved plan yet. But internally, I believe that it is all consistent with the closest planning.
No,
Yes.
So is that why there's a need to go to the BZA because you're trying to modify your campus plan?
So it's a bit different than a campus plan like you would see for a normal school because it's called a private school plan. But yes,
No, but
to do any construction, you have to have it shown on that plan. This addition is not shown, so we do need to get approval.
Okay. I'll stop. Thank you.
Okay, Swallow?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm in support of this. It seems very reasonable. So hoping that you can get in touch with Commissioner Nash soon and bring this to the commission.
And if I recall last time, again, to stress, you're not proposing any kind of additional enrollment capacity with this.
That is correct. There is no change to the enrollment cap or the faculty and staff cap that was approved back in 2017.
Okay, and no change to parking.
There is no change to parking because this building is not, that's based on the size of the largest facility, and this would not become the largest facility. The gymnasium would be continue to be that largest facility, which is what has been since, for the last couple of decades.
Okay, great. Cool. Well, again, we'll make sure to try and get this recording definitely in front of Commissioner Nash while you guys continue to reach out to him, and then we'll discuss if it needs another presentation at our ANC meeting this month before we take a vote on it. But again, thank you for coming and presenting this to us this evening. I think it looks really cool, and I know there's a ton of ADA upgrades needed on the building, and this greatly improves the accessibility to what you have there. So great.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. We're excited as well.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Cool. All right, with that, we will move on to the informational presentation on Green New Deal for Social Housing Bill. And John, hopefully there's only one of you now so I can find you.
Yep. Hey, y'all.
Thank you for coming, and you're welcome to take it away.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here, and for inviting us. Before I start, is it okay if I present some slides?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, my name is John, he, him. I'm an organizer with DSA here in the city and help run our social housing campaign. I have two folks who organize with me, Fatu and Tuan, who have done great work here. And yeah, I'm just going to present on the movement for social housing in DC and the upcoming, or the bill that is currently in the council and likely will be reintroduced next year. Kind of like a little bit on the background of why this movement is taking place, and how ANCs can get involved. Before I start the slides, like we're kind of doing this outreach to ANCs and holding these presentations partially to get support for the bill and build ANC support, but also like want to make sure it's like a two-way street. Like kind of want to hear commissioners' concerns or thoughts or anything around that or questions as we advocate for this bill in particular. So I will share my screen. Chrome. Great. Can people see that? Awesome. Great. So I probably will only take like 10, a little over 10 minutes, if that's okay. Great. But I will I'll talk about what social housing is briefly, how DC, a quick overview of how DC has tackled affordable housing so far. I'm sure y'all know a lot of that. What the current bill as it stands does, how it overlaps with climate goals and sustainability, and kind of where the movement for social housing is in the city. So actually we'll start with this side, just because it's pretty and has pictures, but social housing just generally is a concept that is not unique to DC at all, and is relatively new in the American context, but has been used primarily in European cities and popularized there as a way to tackle housing that isn't just reliant on the private market. And in doing so, and being a nonprofit type of housing, is able to service residents of all types of income and build housing that is closer to the center of the city, closer to transit, and keeps people within their communities, often in the center of their city, and is affordable. At its core, it is housing that is publicly owned. In the context of DC, it would be owned by the District of Columbia. But in other countries, it's often like federally owned or state owned. Majority subsidized and minority market rate. So it's housing that is built with the landlord being the city itself. And more than half of it is for people making underneath the area's median income, with a certain segment of it going towards like can be rented at any rate. Is generally market rate, which is important because it helps actually subsidize the rest of the housing. Traditionally, and we've seen this in DC, but in American cities across the country, a lot of the ways we've tackled low-income housing has been to, just focus on low-income housing. And in that way, when you get a new government, when you get a new council or legislature, generally, they can often like defund the housing that was built up and kind of allow it to move into disrepair. It's mixed income, bringing folks together from a variety of different income levels. That's really important just for community building. We know that, having people that are meeting people across the economic spectrum, like actually does increase the livelihood and vibrancy of our neighborhoods, and also brings opportunities across that spectrum. It's nonprofit or limited profit, just kind of as a different definition. So it cannot, by definition, be profit a single landlord, the landlord being the city. The profits from it either need to be limited to a certain amount or need to go back into the system to help build more of that housing or to do repairs on and maintain the building itself. And traditionally, it's been popular across the country, but Vienna in particular, and I will share with y'all at the end of this a really lovely and inspiring article that recently came out on Vienna's social housing system, where I think it's around 60% of renters are actually renting from the city itself in a form of social housing. But there have been other places like Singapore. Montgomery County has a form of social housing just a few miles north from us, or east from me. And California, Colorado, and Rhode Island are all right now going through some form of a legislative process to create, state-owned multi-income housing. Some using the frame social housing and some using other ways of talking about it. And I think the last part of it, this isn't like inherent to the definition, but often it is written in the legislation that it is central to downtowns and transit. It is a way of trying to bring affordability to like the places where people actually work and live and are near their friends and family. Just some examples quickly. This is a permitted building to the way left called Hillendale Gateway in Moco, just north of here. And to the way right is another Montgomery County building, the Laurel, that is already built and was recently written up in the New York Times. And then the middle is probably the largest example in the world of social housing called Alt Erla in Vienna, in Austria. It's very kind of like known for its beauty and incorporation into the natural landscape. And, before I get into like how DC's tackled housing, I think I should have brought in like why I'm personally excited about this. Like, I have organized around, tenant organizing and a variety of other organizing the city for a while now. And I think there's a lot of really well-intentioned and actually very productive like ways that the city has tackled housing, but as like the nation overall goes through a housing crisis, and we see it, exacerbated in the city, particularly over the last decade. A lot of those systems are reliant on the private market in ways that like sometimes inherently can't get at deeply affordable housing, or are doing so in ways that like put that affordable housing like on the fringes of the city. And so I'm really excited about this because I think it creates housing that is that really like brings it, where it needs to be, and also is a bit self-sustaining. So I actually won't go into this too much, but generally DC is focused on inclusionary zoning, the Housing Production Trust Fund, and voucher-based programs, as well as public housing, which the federal government mostly subsidizes. The bill as it stands, it was introduced fall of 2021 in one iteration, and then again this spring, very similar legislation. And overall, it does a lot of the tenets of what I described earlier. Builds housing within thriving transit-connected neighborhoods. So there's some stipulations in there that the housing needs to be within, I think it's 15-minute walkability to major metro stations or bus stations. It ensures that the largest percent of that housing is deeply affordable, so residents are paying a reasonable rate to live there. And the way that they calculate, they use actually I'll get into that later. It uses revenue from a smaller percentage of market rate units to ensure that the rest of that stock is well maintained, and excess revenue can help build new social housing. And it actually also allows the district to take really big strides towards its climate goals to get its buildings off of fossil fuels. And it does that by insisting that all the new buildings that it will build will not have gas hookups. They'll be electrified. Just to get into that a little bit more, and I know this is like a little wonky, so I'm happy to go into it more, but you've probably heard of AMI, like the area's median income. 30% of the units that social housing that the department would build and manage would need to be for folks making 0 to 30% of the area's median income. Another 30% would be for 31 to 80% of the area's median income. And the remaining 40% would be market rate. So it could be rented at any rate, and hopefully would be able to kind of subsidize the rest of it in some way. Sustainability, buildings are electrified, an integral step to moving us off fossil fuels as a city. Buildings are a huge part of the city's climate, carbon impact. And so, yeah, really important. And there are stipulations in there that landscape designs include tree coverage and other infrastructure. So we aren't exacerbating, environmental racism and inequity by changing tree landscapes and things like that. What it would do structurally is create a new agency called the Office of Social Housing that is separate, but also governed by the mayor's office and the city council, mostly the mayor's office, which would buy property, build and manage properties, and or hire building services. And the office's board would be involved in the operational oversight with the help of tenants for building maintenance. So while there'd be a board that is appointed mostly by the mayor, because under home rule, we have to have a certain amount of appointment, has to be appointed mostly by the mayor. Tenants would have some say via tenant leadership boards. Each building would be empowered to review and authorize property management contracts and community rules. That's really important because if you've ever worked with tenants in some of the more Section 8 vouchered housing or things like that, a common complaint is that the companies that are helping them manage those buildings, clean up, the utility maintenance, things like that, often are not doing well, and they want to have some say in who gets those contracts. So this would ensure that tenants actually have some governing power over their actual buildings and where they live. And at the top, that board, the coordinating council, is composed of public officials, housing experts, and 3 of the seats would be allocated towards tenant leaders themselves of the 9. As it stands right now on the council, the co-introducers of the bill are 1 through 7 up there: Robert White, Janice Lewis George, Brianna Doe, Zachary Parker, Treyon White, Brooke Pinto, and Charles Allen. They have introduced the bill throughout both those introductions, the fall and the spring. And Matt Fruman, this is subjective, but I think he's probably going to introduce it next year as well. He seems very supportive. Anita Bonds, for reasons I actually don't know, was supportive the first time, but not the second. And Mendelson, McDuffie, Henderson, or Gray are kind of figuring out their relationship to the bill.
Sorry, John, do you have many more slides? I want to make sure that we can do some questions and comments on the.
Of course, I have 2 more. I'll be clear.
Okay, cool.
The coalition is made up of tenant advocacy groups, housing groups, climate groups, DSA, a bunch of others. In order to pass this, we've also been working with some of the major kind of like tenant rights groups, like Marbury Plaza tenants right now, to push for it. And I think the things we're asking in talking to ANCs, a few ANCs have already passed committee resolutions for B, 4D, and 2A, and we're asking if ANCs, if they're able to do the same to support the bill. We're also asking commissioners if they can sign on individually in support of the the legislation in particular, but the movement generally. We have a sign-on letter that I'll send around the chat. And also just like want to, open up for questions and for folks if they want to get more involved to kind of push for this kind of historic and important type of new housing in the city.
Great.
And with that, I will end.
Thank you. So I know I have a lot of questions / comments, maybe suggestions, but Adam, do you want to start, since your hand seemed to shoot up at something?
Sure.
And also thank you, John, for your presentation. It was super helpful.
Yes, thank you. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I firstly wanted to say this was a great presentation. I think the cause is great. I do have some reservations on the city managing buildings, because we've seen with the DC Housing Department as it stands right now, they're not very good at managing many things. I do want to talk briefly, because you did mention it, about inclusionary zoning, because I don't think it's talked about enough. Last year, I was working for an organization that we shall remain nameless, but you would think they would pay more than they actually do. And I did qualify for inclusionary zoning, and I think the process to be approved for inclusionary zoning is quite difficult. It requires people to take, I believe it's 4 hours out of their workday to sit on a Zoom and learn about the inclusionary zoning process. And I believe it's an additional 2 hours if you're looking to buy an inclusionary zoning unit as opposed to renting one. And then you're put on a list that you're on for a year. And I mean, I think I'm still on the list, even though I've now no longer qualified for it. But the amount of emails that I've gotten, I think I can count on like one hand. So I do think, like, in addition to this, I do think it would be worthwhile for us to also be taking a look at the process of becoming, if that's the word, or being on the inclusionary zoning list. I just think it's an aspect where you would think that the process should be easier than it actually is. And I think when you're asking, I was lucky because I worked from home and I could be on a 4-hour Zoom and my job wouldn't know. But if you're not working from home, or if you're an hourly employee, I mean, those 4 hours is
So
money.
are you, maybe, if I can kind of get to where this might be well, it is helpful, but like also including in the Green New Deal, like some sort of process, like,
Yeah.
Like we need to do better about getting folks, if we build this housing, into the
Mhm.
house.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Filled up. That's a great point.
Hayden, I saw you had your hand up there for a second and then took it down.
Yeah, I was just gonna co-sign on Adam's point. IZ, the process of it, I don't know that many people who, need, housing can really get on a Zoom in the middle of the day during the work week. Just much like work weeks in the ward, work days in the ward, to all of those.
I also believe there was a test at the end, but don't
Oh,
quote me.
no, they do have a test.
Yeah, okay.
And then the whole thing, just like you said about the buying it, like, it just like, it's like very unclear who they're going for with that. I imagine Swale is going to, or Commissioner Siddiqui is going to raise the point of the 2022 resolution that we passed. I also I'm very grateful of that and would love to point to that. In 2022, we did pass that resolution, and my hope is between now and our next commission meeting to bring forth another resolution, bringing about the points that we hit on in that resolution and in the one pager that you sent over to us, John. That's all I got. That great presentation.
Thank you. And briefly, why we're kind of bringing up the IZ things, I think we really need, both in the district and probably nationwide, to look at those numbers and those sets, because of the food insecurity, the inflation, and all the things, and the other costs of living, and that those brackets or thresholds might not be the right and the most optimal, in my opinion. That was one of the things I was going to bring up. Swale.
Yeah, I was going to mention our 2022 resolution. You all said feedback, like would appreciate looking at that and seeing, some of the points we had. We had some points about tenant protections in there, like adding some of that stuff and other things as well. And I guess the additional point I'll make with that is it'd be good to figure out how can we, as ANC3C, encourage more type of this housing in our neighborhood, right? Like I know you're writing a general citywide bill, but the reality is like we don't build any affordable housing here. And like there's stories of like folks having to leave the neighborhood and no one can afford living here. And so I'm wondering, because at least the way, not but like most of the time when inclusionary zoning targets and all those things are set up, at least right now how the mayor sets them up, they're very targeted to Rock Creek West, for example, right? And like, it's something, when we try and advocate for more housing, it's something very good that we can point towards, is that like our neighborhood doesn't build housing, and so we should, and all that stuff. And again, I'm not saying that you all should, copy exactly what the mayor's doing with that type of housing targets, but it would be good to call out neighborhoods like ours, like we don't have affordable housing. And so if social housing needs to be in a place, it needs to be this neighborhood type thing. So if there's ways of including language that, and we can help you with that. Like we can include language in a resolution so you don't have to take the hit for it, like, oh, you're out there targeting Ward 3 or whatever. Like, no, like you can point to our resolution, and we're happy to also add, well, at least I am, like, and I'm sure other commissioners are too, happy to advocate to our council member to like support stuff like that as well. So yeah, as much as you can include language like that and things like that, like I would personally be very, very supportive of that.
Yes, we definitely can do that. That's a great point. And I love, thank you so much. I completely agree with all of that. I think, I guess just to respond to a few quick things. This is really helpful. And like, also one thing I have done is like compiled different points and comments and excitements and things like that from we've only presented like 5, I think, ANC so far, but we have a bunch scheduled. And I'm going to like kind of compile them and bring them into our lobbying with different city council members, as well as the resolutions and all that, just so that they hear their thoughts. And yes, I think creating an application system that is easier for folks to go through, I think is so important. One thing that I think does give me more hope around this social housing and the creation of a department of that is that, unlike the Housing Authority right now, which is a quasi-independent government agency and famously has been, not as there have been ramifications of that where it has not been able to, the transparency around its funding, its budgeting, and all the reasons it's been in the news continuously over the last few years. That I think I hope and I think will be reduced because it is more directly managed by the mayor's office in particular, and regulated in some ways by the city council. So I'm hopeful that is one way to make it more viable.
Great. Bowen?
Thanks very much. really appreciate the presentation. I'm pretty new to some of these concepts, although I'm really intrigued by them. And if I can just sort of bounce a couple concerns, maybe you can respond to. Like Suale, I think our neighborhood would be great for something like this, for some social housing. We have good schools. We have this tremendous neighborhood that can be an economic mobility engine if we can get people who need economic opportunity into and educational opportunity into our neighborhood. So we really need to do something about that. The question is, value for dollar. Prices for buildings or construction in our community are going to be more expensive than in other parts of the city or other areas generally. And so the question is, and I've heard this said about public housing generally, is that if you want to build more of it, you would build it in sort of cheaper land rather than having to buy more expensive land and then get less value for your money. So I'm curious if you have a response on that or a theory on that problem, which is about how to apply return on investment on this. So if I can keep going just for a couple questions, does social housing sort of require a new design? Like, do you need to construct, or can you buy existing buildings and so forth and convert them into social housing? Because that would be interesting to think about. And the last thing is interest rates going up. I mean, is a big problem for housing construction and housing transactions in general. Curious if that is figuring into your plans or scenario. All right, I'll stop there.
Yeah, those are all great points. And also I can try to loop back on some of these points too, because well, I do know more about this bill than others. There's like a lot of real smart people working on this that maybe would have other responses. So I will definitely bring it to a larger group. I think on the kind of like point around economic value of the land and what I think that is a really good point. And the way that the way that this would be set up is that like a pot of money would be put into the department at first to acquire land or and this starts to get at your second question, or to immediately start building on currently publicly owned unused land or modified land that then is used. And there are a few examples of that. And the land acquisition part of that, one, currently in the bill, the council needs some new, in order for like the city to acquire land in this way, for it to own kind of in perpetuity. Currently the bill has a changing, like a part of the bill changes. I think it's our zoning law so that they're allowed to do that. But that part of the bill actually might be passed earlier than this in a separate bill, wonky. And I think it's like a real issue that using the money that the department would have, they don't just focus on the cheapest land, which often I think would lead towards building in certain areas over others that might not have as many economic opportunities. I think like what is hopeful is that there is the possibility of renovating several there's the opportunity to renovate existing buildings, and there's several buildings that folks are currently campaigning around. For instance, the fire department on U Street, there's different considerations for how it will be sold and used. There's I think Power DC right now is kind of like pushing for that to be used as a first test case of social housing. I think it's exciting, and then it's like getting the council to think about first plots of land and where they could actually be, and where we have access to land that could be immediately sold and is publicly owned right now and could be used. The timeline of when the bill would pass and when that could be bought and then implemented, like that might not work out, but it's still an exciting opportunity. Marbury Plaza is another one, which doesn't really get at your answer. And I think another part of this is, even though the upfront value of the land in, an area, more expensive area might be daunting as a first purchase, the amount that you can hopefully rent that as market rate could ideally, under could ideally like help pay off some of that quicker than other parts of the city. So I'm having that significant chunk of the housing 40% be market rate. I think it helps get at some of those concerns a little bit about where they would target the first purchases of land. But we'll see. In the interest rate part, I don't have a strong answer for you yet, but
well, but it's just financing it, the interest rate thing, you can kind of, because you're not going to have to be taxing it, because you're, as the city, not going to tax yourself. But anyways, sorry to cut you off, but I live and work in a lot of this, you know, space of housing and building stuff. The Pruitt-Igoe story is always going to haunt people who know anything about social housing in the United States of America and what happened with Pruitt-Igoe and how it was a gross failure and has scared a lot of people off of this idea, right? So, and a lot of, like, it's not that much to actually build the building. It's really not. The cost that's incurred is the operation and the maintenance of the building, mainly on that operating side. So I think it would be great to add into this social housing idea is it's a jobs program. When we're constructing the building, that's a jobs program. We're getting like X amount of we're upskilling labor, because that's the other thing. We have an issue with not having enough labor, and that rises the cost of construction sites. But now, because we're training somebody to have like a union, good paying job in this construction force. And that's just going to be a constant return on the investment that we're making in that individual, right? Across the board. And this has been proven out in Philadelphia. I was just at a talk today where they had 42 people enroll in this jobs program for this housing construction site, and 46 of them or whatever, don't quote me on that, but most of them left with a job in the industry. Let's add that. And that goes to the other green new jobs things too. So it's constantly sustaining itself in a bit. And that's another thing when you talk about like the tenants organizations and stuff, we should have people be trained too as property managers of their own property, because you're going to care a lot more about your neighbors in your building, and you also have a job now. Like, yes, that should all be added into there. So it should always be a yes and not just yes, the cost of land and all of that. The other thing is WMATA and the city own a bunch of land over transit stations are around them. Like there's already existing plots there that are just like hanging out, not being utilized to the greatest extent that they could be. And a lot of that is usually because there's some silly like zoning nugget that puts a whole wrench in everything, because then now I'm increasing the cost because I'm having to pull those strings and it's taking longer. But I think there's a lot of good stuff in this. I just think that operations and maintenance cost in perpetuity, like that's going to be tough. But my opinion, I think if you do have that element of like a jobs program where it becomes something more than just this one thing, it's all of these others. I feel like there's a there. Sorry to ramble on, but
no, it's a great point.
It's like really top of mind because I did spend a few hours.
No, I love it. No, that's a great point, and we will definitely bring that back. I think, and your point about WMATA's land, I think WMATA owns. I remember when they testified, or a representative who had organized around WMATA, it's over 1,000 acres of land, I believe, in total. And so it's like, I don't know, the parts that are over public metro stations, and could be exciting.
Yeah, and the other thing is we really need to refine our permitting system when it comes to buildings, like I just heard again about DDOT's curb cut approvals process that has to go to 28 different departments and individuals within DDOT only to get approved. And like where a building has, 50 IZ units that can come online, they're delayed by 2 years or more because of that process, because you have to go from one agency process, next agency process, right? So it's not running concurrently, and you're not going to take a risk on your project because the first agency is not going to approve it. So that's probably a whole different other thing. But when it comes to the cost of building, the initial upfront cost, that's a lot. And it would be even for DC to do internally. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on social housing.
Loved it. Thank you.
But I think this is really great and thank you for presenting. And if anyone else have questions, comments for right now? Tammy?
I don't have like any like deep comments that haven't already been said, generally supportive of it. It's something I'm very much learning about as a first-time commissioner. So appreciated your presentation and just continuing to learn more. So shoot me things as you have them that I should read up on.
Yeah, I too really enjoy these informational presentations rather than reading heavy legalese. It's just way more helpful for us to understand and then for us to relay to the community, and a greater understanding is very helpful.
I'm so glad. That's why we're doing them. So I'm really glad to hear that helps. This is really great, and thank you all for giving me the space. And I will definitely written down these points. If you want to be in touch about any of this, I'll put my email in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Great. Does anyone have anything else for this evening?
No.
All right. With that, we'll wish you a good evening, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.